Welcome back to the channel. My name is Rochelle from Rochelle.Handmade.Designs, and in this video I am finally doing that sew along for the tailored blazer that you have heard me talk about for months. I want to say I started talking about this blazer way back last year in 2021, back in like August or September of 2021. I have not gotten around to doing it, but now I have completely finished it, and this is the sew along that we are doing today. So before we get started, go ahead and hit the like button and the subscribe button, and also turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So there's a few things I want to tell you about before we get right on into this sew along. Number one, if you plan on doing this blazer in a week, all power to you, because you see that it have taken me over 4 months to finish this blazer, okay? Number two, I do not have the blazer on because it needs to be professionally pressed. I use a tweed and a silk lining for the inside lining of the blazer. It did not look great to put on, and I didn't want to embarrass myself like that. So it needs to be professionally pressed. Even though I press my garments all the time, a blazer needs to be professionally pressed. That's the number two tip. Number three tip, if you plan on doing this blazer, allow about a good month to construct the entire thing. The outside shell, main shell of the blazer, great, you could do it in a day or two. But that lining and that facing, oh my gosh, it almost took me out. It almost took your girl out, for real. So I just want to give you a couple of tips. So in this video, I am putting chapters in because it is a extremely long video, over an hour long. So I'm putting chapters. You can look in the description box below to jump to the portion that you want to jump to. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get right on into this sew along for this tailored blazer, utilizing Simplicity 8844. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the next tutorial, and we will be doing a tailored jacket or tailored blazer utilizing Simplicity 8844. Now, this one I will be sewing along to view A on the pattern. I will not be doing the pockets on the pattern, but the fabric options that you can use for this pattern are brocade, cotton types, lightweight denim, linen types, poplin, sateen, shearsucker, and then you can use wool if you choose. Now for me, I will be using some tweed fabric that I showed in my December sewing plan, so you could look up and see that video, but you'll also see it here as well. Now, just make sure for the notions you have your coordinating thread, and you will need one 7/8 inch button. If you need to use a 1 inch button, you could do so as well. And then what I will be doing is a sleeve heading. If you remember when I did the Corella DeVille jacket, I also did a sleeve heading there. Just make sure that you cut a strip of fabric, just one, 3 inches by 10 inches for your sleeve heading. So make sure you do that. Just drop, you could also draft out a little pattern piece that measured 3 inches across, 10 inches down, and make your box. You could do that as well. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get right on into the items that you will need in order to construct this blazer. All right, so let's talk about the items or tools that you will need in order to construct this tailored blazer. Of course, you will need the pattern, which we are using Simplicity 8844. You will also need some marking tools. So I pulled out a highlighter to highlight my pattern piece, not highlight my pattern pieces, but my pattern instructions, as well as the pieces that I will need in order to construct my tailored blazer. I also have a pen, and this pen is because I will be using tracing paper to trace out patterns for my interfacing. I will be using a Sharpie so you can see it on camera, but you should use a pencil when tracing out your pattern pieces. I also have some chalk that I will be using as well to mark out my, lines, and if I need to make any darts whatsoever. I also have a white soluble disappearing pencil. I have a tracing wheel. Now you can use the tracing wheel and trace out your pattern piece. However, I will be using transparency see-through paper that I have here. I have a seam ripper just in case I make a mistake and need to rip out any seams. I have my clippers for when I'm at the sewing machine to clip thread. I have a point turner to poke out any sharp edges that I have, like the collar area. For sure, you will need your point turner. Then I have some pins to keep everything together. I have my rotary cutters. Now I use one for paper, one for fabric. I never mix the two there. So here's my one for paper and my one for fabric, and I also have them labeled, so I never mix the two there. And then I also have scissors. So I have the purple one for paper, this one for fabric. I never mix the two there, but I only use my fabric scissors when I'm like at the serger. Now I will not be needing the serger during this tutorial whatsoever, simply because this is a tailored line jacket. So you will not be needing your serger at all for this tutorial. The last thing that you're going to need is, you can use transparency paper, any type of paper, to trace out your pattern piece for heavy interfacing. So I'll show you how to do that here shortly. Now that's all the tools and supplies that you will need outside of your button and your thread that you will use coordinating thread with this pattern, but that's all the tools and supplies that you will need in order to construct this blazer. So let's go ahead and get right on into the pattern instructions. All right, so like I said, we will be sewing along to view A. I went ahead and got my pattern instructions out, and I just want to go over some of the pattern pieces and instructions that you will need in order to construct this blazer. So the first thing you need to do is check which sides you need to cut out. So the first thing you want to do is measure your high bust, that's around your underarm area, all the way around. Make sure that your measuring tape is flat and even all the way around, and also measure your bust. Then you want to know what is the difference between the two. So take your high bust, subtract it from your bust, and see the difference. If you're 1 to 2 inches larger in the high bust area, you need to cut a size B. And when I say a size B, that's for pattern piece number 1, 2, and 8. So if you're 1 to 2 inches larger high bust versus your bust, you need to cut a B cup. If you are 2 to 3 inches, you need to cut a C cup. And if you're 3 to 4 inches, you need to cut a D cup. 4 to 5 inches different is a double D cup. Now for me, I will be cutting a B cup because I am only a 2-inch difference between my high bust and my regular bust area. Now, looking at the pieces that I need to cut for my tailored blazer is you will need to cut pattern piece number 1, but you need to cut the cup that you need. So I will be cutting 1B, 2B, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8B, 9, and 10. Those are all the pattern pieces that you will need to cut. However, please note that pattern piece number 4 needs to be with wrong sides up on the fabric, which is your back. You need to cut pattern piece number 6 with the wrong side up, which is your upper collar. Your under collar, which is pattern piece number 7, needs to be cut with the wrong side up. And pattern piece 8, which is your front facing, needs to be cut with the wrong side up. Now, it also depends on the size that you're cutting, which pattern pieces will need to be with the wrong side up. Now, because my fabric is about 52 inches wide, I am going by 44 to 45 inch fabric cutout, and I will be cutting a size 18 for my pattern. I have already done, you know, some adjustments with enlarging the waist as well as the hip area. If you need to do any modifications to the waist or the hip, you can also go back to my Cruella de Vil jacket, which I will go ahead and put in the cards here, so you could see how I made those adjustments. I will not be making the adjustments again in this tutorial because I have done that already in my previous tutorial on how you can enlarge your jacket to fit the way that you want. So you could go back to my Cruella de Vil jacket. I think it was part 1 where I go over the instructions in order to see how to enlarge your pattern at the waist and at the hips. You will also need interfacing. Now for this jacket, you will need both lightweight fusible interfacing as well as heavyweight interfacing to get that structure of a tailored jacket. Now those are the instructions. Let's go ahead and get right on into the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct this blazer. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the pattern pieces you will need for your tailored blazer. So the first pattern piece you will need is pattern piece number 1. Like I said previously that I will be using the B cup because I am only 2 inches above my high, but 2-inch difference between my high bust and my full bust. So I will be using B cup, but use whatever cup that you need. And once again, I will be cutting a size 18. I did, however, have to make some modifications to the front as well as the back pattern piece. So for me, this is pattern piece number 1, the front. You need to cut 2 of fabric, 2 of regular lightweight interfacing, and you need to also cut 2 of heavyweight interfacing. Now for the heavyweight interfacing, I will show you how we will do that here shortly when we get to that portion. All right, so now before you trace anything out, you need to make all of your adjustments that you need to make to your pattern. Make sure you do that because it will be very sad to sew everything together and you forget to make your adjustments. So do that as well. So this is pattern piece number 1. You will need pattern piece number 1, which is the front. Pattern piece number 2, which is the side front. You need to cut 2 of fabric, 2 of lightweight interfacing, and 2 of heavyweight interfacing. And you will not need to make any adjustments to this pattern. The only pattern pieces that you will need to make adjustment to is the front and the back pattern piece. You will not make any changes to the side front or the side back pattern piece. Now I know you see an adjustment here, but that's simply because I was doing something with this pattern piece before, but this is not part of the jacket that I am sewing. So you will see this gone after cutting and sewing together, all right? So this is pattern piece number 2. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 4, which is your back. You need to cut 1 unfold of fabric, 1 unfold of lightweight interfacing, and 1 unfold of heavyweight interfacing. So make sure you cut 1 unfold of lightweight interfacing, 1 unfold of heavyweight interfacing. Pattern piece number 5. Now this is your side back. You need to cut 2 of lightweight interfacing and 2 of heavyweight interfacing. Pattern piece number 6, you need to cut 1 unfold of fabric and 1 unfold of lightweight interfacing only. Pattern piece number 7, which is your undercollar, you need to cut 2 of fabric, 2 of lightweight interfacing, and 2 of heavyweight interfacing. Pattern piece number 8, which is your front facing, you need to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of lightweight interfacing only. Pattern piece number 9, which is your back facing, you need to cut 1 unfold of fabric and 1 unfold of lightweight interfacing. Pattern piece number 10, this is your sleeve. You need to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of heavyweight interfacing. Now, when we get to the lining, I will tell you what pieces you need to cut out of lining fabric as well. But these are the main pieces that you need to cut out of fabric as well as your lightweight and heavyweight interfacing. Now that I told you what pattern pieces you will need in order to construct this tailored blazer, let's go ahead and get into the heavyweight interfacing now. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about lightweight and heavyweight interfacing. So I'm just going to grab pattern piece number 6 as an example. So when you're cutting out your lightweight interfacing, it is your lightweight fusible interfacing that you normally cut out. And you would cut out all the way around like you would do for lightweight interfacing as well as fabric. So now that that has not changed, let's talk about heavyweight interfacing. All right, so when you do your heavyweight interfacing, like I said, you will need pattern piece number 1, pattern piece number 7, pattern piece number 4, pattern piece number 5, and pattern piece number 10. All of these pattern pieces will be cut out of heavy interfacing. So you need basically the whole outside shell needs to be cut out of heavyweight interfacing. Now, if you notice in the pattern, it does not say anything about heavyweight interfacing, okay? And how you have to do the heavyweight interfacing is you have to take off your seam allowance, okay? Now, I have done a few of them already just to give you an idea of what it would look like. So let me show you. So this is pattern piece number 1, right? So what I did is the seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So all the way around, I removed 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around my pattern piece, okay? So when I cut out my interfacing, my heavyweight interfacing, it will look like this. So when I fuse it together, the seam allowance is already removed. So I don't have that bulk whatsoever. So since the seam allowance is already removed, I don't have that bulk where my lightweight interfacing will be and my fabric will be. So that's why you have to remove that seam allowance all the way around. So around the top is 5/8, 5/8 here, and the center front and the side seam. Now the hem allowance is 1 1/4. So at the bottom at the hem, you need to go up 1 1/4 inch. Now after you take the seam allowance off, you need to place transparency paper. You can get your tracing wheel in order to trace around the lines that you see here from the seam allowance that you have taken off. Now I'm gonna do one for you on camera just to show you what that would look like. All right, so I am going to be doing pattern piece number 5, which is the side back on camera for you, just to show you what it would look like. Now I have some transparency paper that I picked up from Amazon. It's a whole roll of it, okay, because I don't normally trace patterns, but for things like that, I want my pattern pieces to be intact. So that's why I'm just going to show you on camera on how you do this. So the first thing you have to do is remove the seam allowance. I removed the seam allowance all the way around. So I removed 5/8 of an inch seam allowance at the top, around the center front, around the armhole, and then around the side seam. Now the bottom, I removed 1 1/4 inch, which is my hem allowance. So now what I'm going to do is put it underneath my paper. Make sure I have some pattern weights as well. And you do, now I have pattern piece number 4 on this side because I have already traced that out. So make sure you have some pattern weights. And make sure you put your pattern weights down. You do not necessarily have to put it on the pattern piece, but you want to put it around to where the pattern piece can stay down and not lift up. So now what I'm going to do is, I'm hoping you can see this on camera, but where my lines are is where I'm going to trace. So I'm going to trace the top. You only want to trace where the lines are. So I'm going to trace just around inside the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so now once you trace your heavyweight interfacing piece out, right, you want to make sure you transfer your notches and your dots all the way around. Now, you're pretty much not going to need them, to be honest, because it's heavyweight interfacing, so you're not gonna really need them, but you can put them in if you would like. Make sure you label your pattern piece. I'm gonna label it pattern piece number 5, Simplicity 8844. And then I'm gonna say that this is the side back for view A, B, and C. And we will cut 2 of heavyweight interfacing. And make sure you transfer your grain line. Your arrow, your grain line. So you want to transfer that as well. Now, all you need to do, now for me, I like to put in my lines where my waistline is and my hip line as well. And sometimes my bust line to keep everything together. So I'm gonna put my waistline in as well. And now what I'm going to do is remove my pattern piece from underneath and cut it out. So you would do all the pattern pieces that you need for heavyweight interfacing, just like this, tracing it out. Then that way you will not get confused when it's time to fuse your heavyweight interfacing to your fabric. So go ahead and finish doing all the rest of your heavyweight interfacing now. All right, so let's go over the pattern pieces that you will need to cut out of heavyweight interfacing. So I did a few of them, and I'm gonna show you how you need to do this. So this is pattern piece number 1. You will need to cut 2 of heavyweight interfacing, and you also need to cut 2 of lightweight interfacing, 2 of fabric, and then 2 of lining. Now you're going to cut out the entire piece, but how you do that is you remove the seam allowance. So the seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you're going to remove the shoulder, the front, all the way around, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, except for the hem. At the hem, you're going to remove 1 1/4. So then you're going to either use some tracing paper. This is just transparency paper that I picked up from Amazon. What you need to do is trace around that 1 inch removal line. So once you remove the seam allowance, you need to go ahead and trace around that, and this piece become your heavyweight interfacing, okay? So when it's time to cut out your heavyweight interfacing, you will cut out this piece, okay? Now, using lightweight interfacing, you will not need to move any seam allowance. You would just cut out the lightweight interfacing as is, like you're cutting out fabric and lightweight interfacing. You only need to remove seam allowance for your heavyweight interfacing, so it will not create any bulk, okay? So this is pattern piece number 1. The next one that you need to cut out of heavyweight interfacing is your sleeve, of course, which is pattern piece number 10. All right, so for this one, you need to cut 2 of fabric, 2 of heavyweight interfacing only, and then 2 of lining, all right? Now, for this one, you do not need to cut heavyweight interfacing for the entire sleeve. You only need to place your interfacing, the heavyweight interfacing, you just need to trace to this line right here. So let me move this out the way so you can see. To this line right here, which is your adjustment line for Mrs. Petite, you only need to trace to that line. So that's why you only see for my heavyweight interfacing, I'm only cutting a piece to that line, okay? So this is pattern piece number 10, where you need to cut 2 of heavyweight interfacing, 2 of fabric, and 2 of lining. The next pattern piece that you need to cut out of heavyweight interfacing is pattern piece number 2. So after you remove seam allowance, you will need to cut the entire piece out of heavyweight interfacing minus the seam allowance, okay? So this is what it will look like, which is pattern piece number 2B, because I am doing the B cup for mine. So use whatever cup that you need to use, but you need to cut, you should have 2 of fabric, 2 of lightweight interfacing, 2 of heavyweight interfacing, and 2 of lining cut out for this pattern piece. The next pattern piece that you need to cut out of heavyweight interfacing as well is pattern piece number 4, which is your back. Now this pattern piece is cut on the fold. So you should cut 1 unfold of fabric, 1 unfold of lightweight interfacing, 1 unfold of heavyweight interfacing, and 1 unfold of lining. Now remind you that for the back, what you need to do is remove your seam allowance all the way around. If you need to make any adjustment, make those adjustments first before you do your heavyweight heavyweight interfacing. Before you mark out your 5/8 of an inch for your heavyweight interfacing, okay? So now one thing that I will mention is you only need heavyweight interfacing to the adjustment line for Mrs. Petite. You do not need to trace all the way down to the bottom. So when you take out your 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you should get a piece that looks like this that you will cut on the fold of fabric, and it stopped at your adjustment. The next pattern piece is pattern piece number 5. You will cut this out of 2 of fabric, 2 of lightweight interfacing, 2 of heavyweight interfacing, and then 2 of lining. Your heavyweight interfacing minus the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you should trace all the way to the adjustment line, and this is what your pattern piece number 5 would look like, which is your side back. The next and the last piece that you will cut out of heavyweight interfacing is your under collar, which is pattern piece number 7. You need to cut 2 of fabric, 2 of lightweight interfacing, and 2 of heavyweight interfacing. Now, one thing that I want to mention for this pattern piece is these 2 notches right here, you want to go a little down. I want to say about a 1/2 inch, and then you want to curve. Now, first thing you want to do is mark out the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance like you have seen me do on this pattern piece, like you see here. Once you do that, you want to go about a 1/2 inch down from that second notch, and then you just kind of want to make some dashes to make a curve, kind of like to make this curve right here. But you want to stop at this 5/8 of an inch seam allowance line right here. And this is what your pattern piece number 7, your under collar, should look like. And make sure you cut 2 of heavyweight interfacing. So mine look like this. You do not need a big piece like all of this. You just need a small piece to stabilize, okay? That's your under collar. Pattern piece number 6, which is your upper collar, you just need to cut 1 unfold of fabric and 1 unfold of lightweight interfacing. Pattern piece number 8, you need to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of lightweight interfacing. And pattern piece number 9, you need to cut 1 unfold of fabric and 1 unfold of lightweight interfacing. Those are all the pieces that you need to have cut. So go ahead and do all your cutting. Make sure you cut out your fabric, your lightweight interfacing, your heavyweight interfacing, and your lining. Do all of that, and I will catch you in the next video. All right, so welcome back to the next portion of this tailored blazer utilizing Simplicity 8844. In this video, we will go over all the pieces you should cut, how to fuse your lightweight and your heavyweight interfacing, as well as go ahead and construct the body portion of your blazer. So let's go ahead and get right on into the pieces you should cut. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them because I did that in the last video, but one thing that I will mention is this is pattern piece number 1, and I'm going to show you how you need to fuse your interfacing to your pattern piece. So this is pattern piece number 1. So I do have 2 of fabric, 2 of lightweight, 2 of fabric, 2 of heavyweight interfacing, and then 2 of my lining fabric for this pattern. Now, one thing I want to mention is this is my heavyweight interfacing. The seam allowance is removed all the way around, which was 5/8 of an inch. So all I did was put it on top of my wrong side of my fabric, and then I used the lines to guide me to where I need to place it, and then fuse it to the wrong portion of my interfacing. Now, this is just heavyweight. If you had to cut lightweight and heavyweight, which for example is pattern piece number 2, so let me move this out the way just to show you. So this is pattern piece number 2, which required you to cut 2 of fabric, 2 of lightweight interfacing, 2 of heavyweight interfacing, and 2 of lining, okay? So what you would do for pattern piece number 2 is you would fuse your lightweight interfacing to your side front first, and then fuse your heavyweight on top of the lightweight. And of course, the seam allowance is removed from your heavyweight interfacing, okay? Now that we have covered how you should fuse your interfacing to your pattern pieces, like I said, I'm not gonna go into each and every single one because it's pretty much standard for how to fuse interfacing to your pattern pieces, the wrong side of your fabric. So we're not gonna cover all of that. So now that I talked about that, this is how I'm going to, I already cut into my notches, but I need to transfer my dots. Like there's a dot right here on pattern piece number 2. Now, because of my fabric, I will not be able to see the dot on this side of my fabric. So what I'm gonna do is take color coding labels, okay? Which, 3 different colors. I'm just gonna take one, and wherever there's a dot, you can cut these in half, but I'm just gonna reuse them. I'm just gonna take it and put it where my dot is. So right here, I'm just gonna take a pin. And where that pin comes out at is where I'm going to place my dot. Now I have my lining, so I'm gonna remove my lining. And all you need is just the fabric, okay? So I'm gonna replace that where it needs to go. Take my pen, lift the pattern piece up, and then I'm going to place it right where that dot's supposed to be, okay? Which is right here. Then I'm going to take a pen, any type of pen, and I'm going to now mark it, which now that mark will be on my little sticky dot, okay? Make sure you do that to the other side too if you want to use the color coding labels. It's simply because I will not be able to see the dots, my markings on this fabric because it's a tweed fabric, okay? So you could do that for all the rest of your pieces as well. Now that I talked about how to transfer your dots, make sure you transfer all your marking, including the notches as well. Now that I talked about all of those things, we could go ahead and get right on into the sewing of constructing this tailored blazer. All right, so let's go ahead and start working on our tailored blazer. Now, I'm gonna try to do this in order, but like I said in my last video where I did the breast cancer survivors jacket, where I went step by step with the instructions. I have my own way of putting jackets together and stuff like that. I'm going to try to focus on going in order. If I go out of order, it's because I have a way of doing different things, but I'm gonna try my hardest to stay, I'm gonna try to do it exactly how the instructions want you to do it so you can learn construction that way and reading the instructions and seeing how it's done. Now, if you are not doing your jacket with a lining or heavyweight interfacing and you're just doing an unlined blazer, you can use your serger overlock machine or you can use the Hong Kong finish method. Now it tells you how to do the Hong Kong finish. I'm not going to show you how to do that in this tutorial whatsoever, but you can read the Hong Kong method here. You can use your serger, you can do it as an unlined, but for the sake of this tutorial, all seams will be pressed open and I will be constructing mine using a lining. Now, make sure you have transferred all your notches, all your dots, interface your interface pieces, and we are going to go ahead and get started. Starting, like I said, I'm doing view A on the pattern. So the first step, it says that we're going to reinforce inner corners, stitch along seam line for 1 inch on each side of small dot, and then we're gonna stitch through the small dot for number 1. Number 2, I have done that. So basically what you are going to do on pattern piece number 1, it's whatever cup that you are doing. What you're going to do is you have a dot here on number 1. Let me show you on my piece. So what you're going to do is you're going to sew down 1 inch. Now I'm going to make my line. Mine is already in here, but I'm going to show you how you do this. So let me go ahead and grab my ruler. And you're going to sew 1 inch above the dot and 1 inch below the dot. So from here down, you're gonna sew, and then you're gonna go across 1 inch. Make sure you sew through the dot. So you're going to come down and across, and then you're gonna clip into your dot, making sure you do not clip your stitching. So I have already done that. So just make sure you do that for step number 1. So moving on to step number 2. For all views, you're gonna pin your side front, which is pattern piece number 2, to your front, pattern piece number 1, matching small dots. Then you're gonna stitch clipping curves if necessary. So what that looks like for pattern piece number 1 and 2. So let me get my pattern piece number 2. And with right sides together, you're going to put pattern piece number 1 right on top of pattern piece number 2. Make sure you have the right pattern piece. Now, what I'm gonna show you is, if you are unsure of which pieces go together, you want to follow what it looks like on the pattern. So, say for instance, this is the back, so it shows like this, your pattern piece number 1, and then when you place your pattern piece number 2 down, it should mirror that same image. So pattern piece number 2 is like this. So now when you look at this on number 2, you have 2 matching. So when you turn one over, you know that you put this one on top, and then you can pin. Then that way you know that they match up evenly, okay? So all you have to do is pin at your notches. Now you have a dot right here. Make sure you pin at that dot at the bottom, because that's where you will stop sewing, okay? So I'm gonna pin the other notch as well. Then I'm gonna pin along the front portion of my blazer. So go ahead and pin now. Now when you get to an area that you see that's bigger than the other, what you're going to do is just make a couple of snips right here, and it will create some give. Then that way you're able to pin without having to basically pull, and it's not giving for you. So you just create a couple of slits right there, and it will give, so you're able to pin both of them together. And then continue pinning all. All right, so now that I've sewn my front over to my side front, this is what it looks like, and I press my seams open. Now, along the curve area right here, you want to make some clips to where this will lay flat. However, I also want to mention another thing to you. When you are sewing, when you are pressing this, use your seam roll. Reason being is because your bust is not flat, so you do not want to just press this down and end up with a flat busted jacket, okay? I'm not saying that you're flat, but I'm just saying you want to give some structure to it. So use your seam roll and then press all the way down. So that's just a tip. Another tip that I want to give you for this is, As I am sewing the main fabric together, I am also sewing my lining as well. Then that way, when I get to the lining portion, I already have my lining sewn together. So as I am sewing my main fabric, it's going to be the same thing. So you sew your main, sew your lining at the same time, then you already have it done when we get to the lining portion, okay? So this is the lining portion. This is the front and the side front. You can follow along and do this along with the main fabric as you are sewing, or you can sew all your lining together as well when you get to that portion. Now me, I do have 2 sewing machines, so I do have one set up. I have more than 2 sewing machines, but I do have one set up for the color of my lining and then one set up for my main fabric. So I'm able to do that. But if you only have one, you would have to change out your thread depending on the color of your lining fabric. Okay, so now that I talked about that, let's go ahead and finish up with what we need to do next. Now we just finished step number 2, which was we sewed our front to our side front. Now I am not doing the pockets for this blazer, so I am skipping all the way down to number 6. And in number 6, it says we're gonna stay stitch the back neck edge, then we're gonna stitch the side back sections, which is pattern piece number 5, to the back section, which is pattern piece number 4. We're gonna stitch front to back at shoulder seam, disregarding the notch on front shoulder edge for view C. Now I am not doing view C, so I could disregard that portion, but what we're going to do is stitch front to back at the side seams, and then we're going to attach the front to the back at the shoulder seams, okay? So that, in easy terms, I'm reading the instructions to you, but I'm just gonna tell you what we're going to be doing in simple terms that you can understand, okay? So let's go ahead and do number 6. So go ahead and get pattern piece number 4 and pattern piece number 5. So I'm gonna move pattern piece 1 and 2 out of the way and grab my 4 and 5. All right, so this is my side back and this is my back. So make sure you move your lining pieces out of the way because I will be sewing mine at the same time I'm sewing my main garment. Then that way I have basically knocked out 2 things all at once, right? And then you don't have to remember how to sew them together when you do them at the same time. So that's why I like doing mine that way. So what you want to do is open up your back, and then you're going to pin your side back to your back. Now, one thing I want to mention is if you are confused to what side goes to what side, a couple of things you always want to look at is your drawing. So if you put your fabric the same way as you see in number 6 drawing, it would look like this. So you have that, and then you have your other side back. So now your pieces match up. So you have this, you know, this is going to sew onto this side, and this one is going to sew onto this side. So when you turn it over, you know exactly where it's supposed to fall. So when we turn this over like this, we know this pattern piece right here goes on this side, and this pattern piece goes on the opposite side, to where now you know that you will be pinning this side back to this. And then this pattern piece is going to go to this side. So I'm gonna turn it, and then you're going to match up your notches and pin all the way down the length of your side back and your back. So go ahead and do that now. Okay, so now that I have my side back attached to my back, I'm going to attach my front pieces at the shoulders. So make sure you grab your shoulders, your front and side front, and with right sides together, you want to pin at the shoulder seam. Now, before you do that, make sure you have stay stitched around the neck edge of the back. So you're gonna start in the center, sew to one direction, and then flip it over, start back in this back, center back of your back, and then go in the opposite direction. Once you do that, what you want to do is go ahead and pin at your shoulders and side seam. You're gonna pin your side seam as well. So make sure you pin your shoulders, make sure that your seam allowance is pressed open. If you are adding a lining like I am, if you are not, you could do the Hong Kong finish, or you could even just serge your seams. It's completely up to you. So I am making sure that I pin at my notch right here. And then I'm going to pin at my seams to make sure that they stay open and they are matching up correctly. And then I'm going to pin across the remainder of my shoulders. All right, I'm also going to pin my side seam as well, so I'm not running back and forth to the sewing machine so many times. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin my side seam as well. So make sure you pin at this notch right here, pin at the bottom and the top. So I'm gonna pin at the top, and then pin at the bottom, and then pin the length of my side seam. So I'm gonna pin right here, and then I'm gonna pin all the way up the side seam on both sides. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my side seam pinned and my shoulder seam pins, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and at the end, and sew across your shoulder seam and your side seam. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so we have finished. I just need to press my seams open on both my shoulder seams and my side seams, but we have attached the front to the back at the shoulder seams as well as the side seam. So do not forget to press your seams open. I'll be doing that. And what you need to do at this point is go ahead and try on your blazer and see if you have a good fit. Now, if you did not make a muslin for it, I would suggest trying it on. If it's a little too tight, you may want to take out just the side seam 1/4 of an inch at a time. If it's super duper tight, you're just gonna have to cut it all out and start all over. If it's too big, like I said, you could take the side seams in until you get a good fit. So that's completely up to you how you want to do that. So that's all that we have for today. Make sure you come back for the next portion of this tailored jacket, which we will be attaching our under collar, our upper collar, our sleeves, and our lining, and finishing off our tailored blazer. All right, so I am done with my sleeve heading right here. So that's installed. The jacket is looking amazing. So your entire outer shell or main shell is completely done. So just move your blazer jacket out of the way. And what you want to do is grab your facing pieces. Now I'm going to show you 2 different ways of the facing pieces. The first way is for those of you who are doing it as an unlined blazer and not as a tailored blazer, because you can do it that way if you would like. So you want to grab your back facing and you want to grab your front facing. Your back facing is pattern piece number 9 and your front facing is pattern piece number 8. So if you are doing the unlined version of this, you would attach it the way that I'm going to show you. Now, I'm just going to pin it to show you because I have a lining, so I will not be needing a back facing. But what you will do is you would pin right sides together and you're going to pin your front facing to your back facing at shoulders. So just go ahead and pin across on both sides like so. So I'm going to match up that notch here and pin all the way across. And it should look like this. All right. And using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and at the end and sew across both shoulder seams. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that you have done that, if you notice, I have not done it simply because I am not doing an unlined version. I am doing the actual lined version. So I'm just showing you this to show you what you will need to do. So let's assume that this is attached. So your facing should look like this, and I'm going to turn it towards me like this. Now, before you do anything else, if you are adding a label, go ahead and add your label right here. So go ahead and make sure that your label is at least 1.25 inches down from the top so you have room to add in your label. So add in your label right here now. All right, so now what you want to do is go ahead and grab your jacket. And what you're going to do is with right sides together, you're going to pin your facing over your jacket. All right. So if you look, you have 2 notches right here. Now, after you add your label to your facing, you want to go ahead and finish off the bottom all the way around. That's that unnotched area, okay? So there's no notches here. You want to finish all the way around using your serger, pinking shears, bias tape, however you've been finishing off your seams for your unlined jacket, you want to do that now. So what you're going to do is with right sides together, you have notches right here. You're going to pin move your jacket out of the way quickly because there's one other thing we have to do before you pin your facing to your jacket. So get your facing, move your jacket out of the way, and you're going to pin your upper collar to your back facing like so. So there's 2 notches here. So you're going to pin your upper collar to your back facing, matching up those notches. So just make sure you match up both notches in the back, and you're going to pin. So you're going to pin at that notch, pin at that notch, and then you're going to pin across. All right, so just match it up the best that you can. Now just remember, I'm just pinning, so you have a notch right there. So you're going to make sure that matches up there. And then you're going to pin, you have a triple notches right there. You're going to make sure that that meets up right here, okay? And you're going to pin. So it should look like this. Now remind you, if you need to clip, make sure you clip your facing so it will give and lay flat, okay? And then you're going to pin the other side the exact same way. I'm just pinning just to show you what it would look like, but you have 2 notches right here. So you're going to pin there and make sure that it stays in place. And then you're going to pin all the way across right here to keep it all in place. Now, what you're going to do for the unlined version, this is still the unlined version of this tailored jacket. If you do not want to line it, what you're going to do is you're going to start in the back using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning. So all the way until you get to about right here. You might want to make a dot 5/8 of an inch, and then you're going to pivot and sew across, okay? But you're going to stop right after you backstitch after you meet that next pin. This pin right here, you want to backstitch there, flip it over, and then go in the opposite direction, sewing 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So all the way across, pivot, and then sew this little portion right here. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that you have done that, if you know, I'm just pinning once again. What it should look like is you should have a back facing, your upper collar, and your 2 facing pieces. So what you will do now is grab your jacket, and all you're going to do is pin your upper collar to your under collar with right sides together. You're going to match up those notches all the way in the back. I'm going to pin there. I'm gonna pin at the other one. And then all that's left for you to do is pin all the way across the upper collar area, your under collar area. Your under collar area is this portion that's part of your jacket, okay? So you're gonna pin your under collar, which is this one attached to your facing, to your upper collar all the way across, okay? Once you do that, you can do this two different ways. You could go ahead and sew this using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you do that, then you could go ahead and pin your facing to your front portion of your coat, okay? Like so. Go ahead and pin that. Now, that I showed you how to do all that, I'm gonna show you how to do it with the lining. Now, I am doing the line version, so I'm just gonna show you how to do the line version now. All right, so got my sleeves. I'm gonna show you the jacket. I have my sleeve heading in. So this is what the sleeve heading is looking like. So the jacket is done. Your outside shell should be done, which is the outside portion of your jacket. So the next thing we're gonna do is go ahead and move your jacket off to the side, the main shell, and grab your lining pieces. Now I'm gonna show you the lining pieces, what you should have done. This is what my lining is looking like thus far. Now, like I told you in the first part, that I did my lining the same time I was constructing my jacket with slight modifications, okay? So the first thing is my front piece, which is this piece, my front is attached to my side front, which is this piece, front, side front. My back, which was cut on the fold, which is this piece right here, my back is attached to my side back. And then what I did was with right sides together, you would normally attach at the shoulder seams. But I did unpick that portion is because I forgot that I have to do the facing pieces a little different because this is a tailored blazer versus just one that comes with the lining, okay? So instead of sewing at the shoulder seams, do not sew your front to your back at your shoulder seams. All you need to do is attach your front to your back at the side seams. But what you're going to do for one side seam is leave a 6-inch opening like you see I have done right here. So leave a 6-inch opening on one side seam. Then on the other side seam, which is this one right here, it's sewn all the way down, okay? Now, that is your lining. Now, let me move over to the sleeves quickly for your lining. So when you line your sleeves, you're going to create basting stitch along the sleeve cap of your sleeve. Once you create the basting stitch, then you're going to sew your underarm seams right sides together using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're gonna sew your underarm seam, but you're going to leave a 3-inch opening on both underarm seams. So there's a 3-inch opening here, and then on the other sleeve, there is a 3-inch opening here. So you want to leave that opening on your sleeves. Now that I talked about that, I'm going to show you 2 ways of constructing your facing piece. So what you want to do is go ahead and grab your facing piece. Now, if you are doing the unlined version, you want to grab your back facing and your front facing. Now, because I have lining, I'm just going to show you how to pin these together. I am not going to sew it together for you. So what you would need to do is with right sides together, you want to pin your front facing to your back facing, matching up this notch right here, and you're going to pin. You're gonna pin across both the front and back facing all the way across, and then using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're gonna back stitch at the beginning and at the end and sew across both shoulder seams. Once you do that, press your seams, well, finish off your seams and press your seams towards your back facing. go ahead and add in your label as well while you do that, all right? After you do that, you want to go ahead and finish off the outside area of your front and back facing, meaning the area that does not have the notches. So you're going to finish off this side of your facing piece, okay? Once you do that, just hold tight and we will continue. While you could continue with me after you do that. I will show you how you will attach it to your upper collar as well as to your jacket. So just hang tight after you do that. So let's continue with the lining portion of this jacket, all right? All right, so if you are doing the lining, the lined version versus the unlined version, you will need your front facing pieces and your lining. You will not need a back facing if you are doing the lining piece. So what you're going to do is you're going to get your lining and you're going to look at the front and the side front section, okay? And then what you are going to do is you're going to, with right sides together, you're going to line up your front facing pieces on both sides. So you should have your lining pieces looks like this, right? And you're going to pin at that notch. So you have a double notch here. You're going to pin there and you're going to pin the entire length of the front portion of your lining to your facing piece, your front facing to your lining front, okay? With right sides together. So go ahead and pin there now. Now you're also going to pin around this neck area, the front area where you have a double notch. You're going to pin that double notch there and you're going to pin in that corner and then pin your shoulder seams right here. Well, the front facing part of your shoulder seam. So go ahead and pin there as well. You want to make sure that it matches up and you want to pin there. All right. Now a couple of tips, and I sewn this together and had to unpick it because what I did was I sewed the lining, the facing pieces together and the lining with the sleeves on it, and then noticed that the upper collar did not fit. So that's why I went ahead and unstitched it to review this part again before filming this part, okay? So that's why you see a couple of thread in mine. Sometimes we make mistakes even though you have been sewing for a while. So just get in the habit of just having your handy dandy seam ripper, which I have close by just in case you make a mistake. All right, so now that I have the front facing pinned to my lining using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm gonna sew across right here. I'm gonna sew across right here, pivot 5/8 of an inch, come down, pivot when I get to this dot, and then go ahead and pivot across right here. And then after I pivot across, I'm going to come down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and stop at the very end. Do not try to sew across your hem. All you're gonna do is come down. You're gonna be back stitching at the beginning and at the end. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so I did the other side. I'm going to do this side. And one thing I wanna make note of is, since I'm pinning this one for you on camera, since I already did the other side, I'm going to pin at the notches, just to recap, pin at your notch. And then you're gonna pin at your bottom. But when you pin at your bottom, you want to pin 2 inches from the bottom and then pin all the way up until you get to your shoulder edge, okay? So I'm gonna pin all the way up. Now, one thing I want to mention is if you have not stay stitched the front edge of your front facing, do so and then clip into that corner right here so it will give when you start sewing and attaching your upper collar to your facing piece. All right. So after you do that, you're going to pin at the shoulder as well. And then what you're going to do is you're going to head over to your sewing machine and using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to backstitch at the beginning and at the end. Now, I do want to mention one thing about the shoulder situation. Now, I did not sew across the shoulders. What you're going to do is you're going to stitch all the way up to the top, like so. Let me show you what that looks like. So I did pin across the shoulders, but I did not sew across the shoulders. All I did was I started at the hem. On the other one, I started at the hem. So I'm gonna start right here at the hem, back stitch at the beginning, so all the way up. When I get about 5/8 of an inch from this corner, I'm going to pivot, sew across. When I get to this dot, I'm going to pivot and sew up. And I'm going to be back stitching at the beginning and also at the end. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I went ahead and sewn my front facing onto my lining with right sides together, it's looking really nice and crisp right here. You see it on both sides right here. Now, it should look something like this. I already did this portion, so I'm gonna do this portion. So now what you're going to do is with right sides together, you're going to attach your front to your back at the shoulder seams. So what that looks like is basically you're gonna line up your seam lines, of course. So line that up, and then you're going to pin there. And then basically you're just going to pin all the way across your shoulder seams like you would normally do. And then you're going to go to the sewing machine and using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to back stitch at the beginning and also at the end. So go ahead to the sewing machine and do that now, but I want to show you how you're going to pin this, okay? So just note that you will not be pinning the very top portion of your facing. You're just pinning across your shoulder seam, which is the lining. You're just pinning the lining together, the front to the back. Do not pin this shoulder seam all the way over here. Do not do that. Just pin all the way across the shoulder seam. Go to your sewing machine and using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end and press your seams open. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that you have your your lining attached to your facing and you did not sew this top portion of your front facing, now what you want to do is go ahead and grab your upper collar, and with right sides together, you're going to pin your upper collar to the neck edge of your lining as well as your facing. Now you have 2 notches here, which matches up to the back portion of your lining. So go ahead and pin there, and then you're going to pin across your upper collar to your facing pieces as well. So you're just gonna pin all the way across. And like I said, if you need to make a couple of snips, go ahead and make a couple of snips so it could give, right? And then after you pin at that corner, you're just going to pin down the sides because there's a clip right there. You're just going to pin down the side of your upper collar. So just pin there and you're going to pin there, all right? And I'll pin that in just a second. So, and then you're going to pin the other side the same way. So go ahead and pin your upper collar to your facing now. All right, so now that I have my upper collar pinned to my lining and front facing using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to start in the center back. I'm going to start at the center back and then sew to one end. Once I get to that dot, I'm going to pivot and sew to the end of this dot right here, which you probably can't see, but I can see it on mine. And then I'm going to flip it around over this way, starting in the center back. I'm going to back stitch at the center back and then sew the same thing on the other side. So go to the sewing machine and do that now. All right, so I have my upper collar attached to my lining and my facing. This is what it looks like. Now I do want to make a correction. So do not sew this portion. Like I said, go ahead and sew it down right here at that corner. Do not. So if you sewed it down, go ahead and unpick it, because you will sew it down when you attach your lining and facing and upper collar to your under collar. So go ahead and grab your jacket now. All right, so your jacket, go ahead and lay your jacket down. And what we're going to do is attach our lining pieces at the collar area. So your upper collar to your lower collar, you have 3 notches. So go ahead and pin at those notches. You are almost done. All right, so go ahead and pin at those notches right here that you have. And then you're gonna pin across, of course. And then pin across all your upper and lower collar sections now. All right, so now that you pin across the upper portion of your collar using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning. You could do it 2 ways. You could just stitch all the way across, or you could do what I'm going to do, start at the center back stitch at the beginning, go to one side, sew to that side seam, and then turn it over and sew to the other side seam. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we have our upper collar attached to our under collar, and you have that side sewn or whatever in the peak, so you should have all that done. So now what you're going to do is pin the facing to the coat area all the way down. So you're just going to take, you're just going to take that entire portion and line it up with the front. I hope you could see this. You're just going to line it up with your coat section, pin all the way down that portion. And then when you get, I'm not going to pin it for you because you could do that on your own. So once you get to the bottom portion of it, what you're going to do is sew across using a 1 1/4 inch. Now I marked up my 1 1/4 inch, so I'm able to sew across. So you're going to sew this front on both sides, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and back stitch at the end. Once you get towards your hem, you're going to, so basically you're gonna sew all the way down 5/8, and then after you do that, come to your hem, which you can see mine is marked, which is 1 1/4, and I'm gonna sew across my hem. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that you sewed that seam together right here on both sides, the only couple of things that you have left to do. First thing you have to do is go ahead and hem your bottom using a 1 1/4 inch hem allowance. So basically what you're going to do is, with the right sides together, match up your seam lines to your jackets like you see here. So just match it up all the way around. Now I'm not going to do this on camera because you could do this yourself. So basically you're just going to match it up at the bottom and then sew using 1 1/4 inch hem allowance, okay? Now, one thing that I will mention is you're going to leave about a 6-inch opening at the bottom. Well, actually just sew it all the way across because you left an opening right here at one side seam in order for you to flip your jacket out. So after you sew the hem, you're going to turn your jacket right side out through this opening and give it a good press. Once you do that, go ahead and close up this seam. After you do that, you're going to go ahead and, if you have not done so already, attaching your sleeves, go ahead and install your sleeve. Once you do that, I'm going to show you how to finish off the hem of your sleeves. So go ahead and do that, and then we'll finish off with the hem of our sleeves. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so I did go ahead and stitch my hem in place, but I want to say this before I turn it right side out through my opening, right? So if you know that my sleeves are not done, your sleeves should be done before you turn it out. So what you want to do is you want to go ahead and attach your sleeves. Now, you have two options of doing your sleeves because everything is pretty much sewn together already, right? So what you can do, your sleeve would look like this, but what you can do is once you turn it right side out, you can go ahead and attach your sleeve right here to your underarm seam. Or what you can do, if you want to do a little bit of hand sewing, you can do right sides together. Well, wrong sides together. Like so, pin all the way around and then sew your seam together. Or if you can get into that area right here, you could do right sides together right here. It's completely up to you how you want to sew it together, but you could do right sides together and pin it all the way around and then sew your sleeves into your jacket. Now, the only thing that you have left, you should be able to do this, is turn it right side out, give it a good press. Now, I'm going to take my jacket to the dry cleaners. You do not have to, because this is a tailored jacket. I want to take it to the dry cleaners and get it a good press. Now, once you turn the jacket right side out, now I'm gonna actually put a clip in from my Cruella de Vil jacket on how to finish off the sleeves. So I'll go ahead and put that clip in for you to finish off your sleeves. All right, so now that we have the lining, you know, done or whatever, we turned it right side out. The only thing that you have to do is go ahead and finish off your lining first. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to turn in the seam allowance of the lining, which is 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then you're going to match it up to the seam allowance here on your, so you're going to take your lining, fold it in 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then you're going to meet that seam like this and hold it. But you want to turn it out through, you're going to pin really, but I'm just not pinning. You're going to turn both out through the opening in the sleeves. So when you turn it out through the opening in the sleeves, it's going to look like this, okay? And then all you have to do is where you had that seam allowance, hold it all the way around, do not let it go. And then you're just going to make sure that you're lining up the seam allowance, right? You fix it all the way around. Make sure the seam allowance is matching up, and you're going to pin all the way around. Okay, once you do that, all you're going to do after you pin all the way around, you're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Sew both of your linings, the sleeve linings, to your sleeve on both sides. Turn it right side out through the opening and give it a good press. Then you're going to make sure that you slip stitch, or if you want, you can just go to your sewing machine and sew that sleeve, that underarm seam to your sleeve clothes, and also sew your side seam clothes as well. Once you do that, give your jacket a good press and you are all done with your jacket. All right, so there you have it. You just finished sewing your first, second, or third blazer, whichever number that you on, only you know. So you just finished sewing your tailored blazer. I hope you enjoyed this video. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So I'll catch you in the next video, and as always, keep sewing.